Good morning, YouTube. Good morning, Nerdfighteria. My name is Robert of the Brothers Reyna YouTube channel, and I would like to offer my 2 cents, my take on Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 starts off with the fireman, Guy Montag, though he's not a fireman as we know him today. Rather than having a hose that spouts water to put out fires, he starts fires. His hose is full of kerosene, and he burns, of all things, books. Now, we can see that with the new fireproof houses, that the old purpose of the firemen is no longer necessary. So now they've been repurposed to maintain social stability. Though he and his kind are the right arm of this new social order, he finds himself falling for a young girl who is nothing like their ideal citizen. She is inquisitive, imaginative. She asks questions she really shouldn't be asking. And though Guy should be wary of her, he finds himself all but falling in love with this woman, though he himself is already married. She vanishes halfway through the book, supposedly taken by the authorities and or dead, leaving a mischievous little void in Guy's life. So he starts asking questions. Questions of himself, questions of what he does, questions that he really should not be asking. Before long, he starts sneaking books away that he ought to be burning, thus putting his job in jeopardy. But not only his job, his freedom and his very life, perhaps, depending on the magnitude of his infraction. His boss, Captain Beatty, finds out, who is apparently very well read for a book burner. And he starts screwing with his head before Guy decides he can no longer do his job, and goes and seeks out another reader named Faber, who he takes on as a mentor. Faber is an older fellow and a self-proclaimed coward, and is rather unwilling to do anything to upset the balance. But he does come up with an idea. But Faber had intended it as a joke, to frame all the firemen for having books, so that the trust in the system starts to slowly ebb away. While he finds himself back at the firehouse, starts to hand in his resignation, but his boss convinced him to go on one last job with him. This job, much to Montag's surprise, was to his own house, turned in by his own wife to burn his own books. And after being forced to burn his own books, he turns the flamethrower on his own boss and co-workers, burning them all to death. He starts to run away, and is pursued by this thing called the Mechanical Hound, which we will discuss later. And he comes across a number of hobos. Though these hobos are odd by today's standards, as each of them have some sort of prestigious degree. They have each also devoted themselves to their own respective book, to commit that book to memory in its entirety. For if a day ever comes that books are no longer banned, they can be called on to recite what they've memorized, and thus recreate all the classics of Western civilization. Now, after joining this band of hobos, he is himself assigned a book to memorize, and that is the book of Ecclesiastes. I believe this is significant. Ecclesiastes is a book of the Old Testament in the Bible, one of the wisdom books. One of its key points is that all things of man are vanity, and are as of chasing the wind. That is to say, pointless. Now we compare this to the world of which Bradbury has created, where man has been consumed utterly by these vanities, by these things that are ultimately pointless. The very day after Montag meets the hobos and their leader, Granger, the city from which he came is destroyed in the opening salvos of some subtextual war. This serves the story in several ways, not only to destroy the last remnants of Guy Montag's old life, but also to show that this vapid society is tearing itself apart. Now, I think it bears mentioning that this story is not about government censorship. It is not about some sort of oppression. It is about the sort of mindless society that comes from overindulgence in mindless entertainment. Really, what seemed to have happened is that the government simply came in and took advantage of the already present nihilism in the people. Ray Bradbury supported that interpretation, stating himself that Fahrenheit 451 is about television and other forms of mindless entertainment, not the government. Now, I know what much of Nerdfighteria is going to respond, that books belong to the readers, not to the authors, but I'm sure even John would agree that the words of the author carry a lot of weight. Now, one of the key differences between the worlds that Bradbury knew and the world that Bradbury envisioned is the lack of all sentimentality in the culture. We can see this most egregiously in a conversation that Mildred had with her friends, in which Mrs. Phelps said, "I'm not having children, they're a wilderness, and I would never do it." And another friend, really all she could do to defend it was to say that it's like doing laundry. You simply shove them in a room with a television, close the lid, and let it go. This woman, Mrs. Bowles, had 2 children, both by cesarean, though she herself admitted that she was perfectly fit to bear them naturally. She just did not think that the child was quite worth the agony. And now, as promised, the mechanical hound. It's just what it sounds like, a robotic dog, but with 8 spider legs that helps the firemen in their day-to-day tasks. Whether it be running down a suspect, finding books, really whatever they needed to do. Now, the thing to remember about this is that it's described as both alive and dead. Likewise, the mechanical snake that pumps the contents from Mildred's stomach after she overdoses on sleeping pills. What's more, Mildred herself is described as being both alive and dead. Now, I think Bradbury was trying to describe a world where both man and machine has changed such a degree that they are virtually the same. A world where machines have become so advanced that they can take over our lives, and a world where we have become so nihilistic and oblivious that we would give up half of our lives. No more sentient and no more alive than a household appliance. I know we would like to believe that as a society we could never fall into the dystopia that is Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, that we in our minds are far too engaged to fall for such a thing. But how many people have said things along the lines of, I don't like to read, it's boring, or I don't like discussing politics, it requires me to grapple with issues that I'm not comfortable with. And in fact, how many people are here watching this video for a school project so you don't have to read the book? John Green recently stated in one of his videos that the average American watches 150 hours of television a month. Now, I find this hard to believe. Not really because I doubt it, but because I don't want to believe it. Bradbury saw this coming 60 years ago, in a time when the word nerd had just been coined. And they didn't use it like we use it in Nerdfighteria. It was an insult. If you made good grades and you were engaged in the world around you, you were somehow inferior to those who simply went along with life, who didn't do those things. Popular phrases since that time have included things like go with the flow and peace at any cost. Phrases urging you not to confront the world around you in any way, intellectually or otherwise. Though I must say, the recent nerd movement has given me a bit of hope. If you have any questions or comments about the things I've said, or anything else, feel free to leave them below. Feel free to subscribe if you have enjoyed this video. My brother and I intend to put more content up on this channel, as long as we can get a few viewers to watch it. Don't forget to be awesome, and I look forward to the continuation of this conversation.